Mary Ann Cotton was an English convicted unaliver who was executed for poisoning her stepson. Despite her sole conviction for unaliving, she is believed to have been a serial unaliver who unalived many others, including 11 of her 13 children and 3 of her 4 husbands for their life insurance policies. Her preferred method of unaliving was poisoning with arsenic. Cotton's undoing came after she tried to have her son of her deceased husband sent to a workhouse. When that failed, within days she told parish officials that Charles Edward Cotton had passed away. Investigations into her behaviour soon showed a pattern of deaths. The body of her stepson was examined and found to contain arsenic. Cotton was convicted of unaliving and sentenced to death. She was hanged at Durham Gaol. She did not unalive on the gallows from breaking her neck, but unalived by strangulation because the rope was set too short, possibly deliberately. Mary Ann Robinson was born on the 31st of October 1832 at Low Moseley, County Durham, to Margaret and Michael Robinson, a colliery sinker, and baptised at St Mary's, West Rainton on the 11th of November. Her sister Margaret was born in 1834 but lived for only a few months. Her brother Robert was born in 1835. When Mary Ann was 8, her parents moved the family to County Durham village of Merton. At the time of her trial, the Northern Echo published an article containing a description of Mary Ann given by her childhood Wesleyan Sunday School superintendent at Merton, describing her as a most exemplary and regular attender, a girl of innocent disposition and average intelligence, and distinguished for her particularly clean and tidy appearance. Soon after the move, Mary Ann's father fell 150 feet to his death down a mine shaft at Merton Colliery in February 1842. Her father's body was delivered to her mother in a sack containing the stamp, property of the South Heaton Coal Company. As the miner's cottage they inhabited was tied to Michael's job, the widow and children would have been evicted. In 1843, her mother married George Stott, 1816 to 1895, also a miner. At 16, Mary Ann left home and became a nurse at the nearby village of Southern Heaton, in the home of Edward Potter, a manager at the Milton Colliery. After all of the children had been sent to boarding school in Darlington, over the next 3 years she returned to her stepfather's home and trained as a dressmaker. In 1852, 20-year-old Mary Ann married a colliery labourer, William Mowbray, at Newcastle upon Tyne Register Office. They soon moved to southwest England. At the time of the trial, there were reports of 4 or 5 of their children dying young while they were living away from County Durham. None of these deaths are registered, as although registration was compulsory at the time, the law was not enforced until 1874. The only birth recorded was that of their daughter, Margaret Jane, born at St Germans in 1856. William and Mary Ann moved back to northeast England, where William worked as a fireman aboard a steam vessel sailing out of Sunderland, then a colliery foreman. Another daughter, Isabella, was born in 1858, and Margaret Jane died in 1860. Another daughter, also named Margaret Jane, was born in 1861, and son, John Robert William, was born in 1863, but died the next year from gastric fever. William died of an intestinal disorder in January 1865. The lives of William and of their other children were insured by the British Prudential Insurance Office, and Mary Ann collected a payment of £35 on William's death, equivalent to £4,227 in 2023, about half a year's wages for a manual labourer at the time, and £2 5 for Robert, and about £2 5 for John Robert William. Soon after Mowbray's death, Mary Ann moved to Seaham Harbour, County Durham, where she struck up a relationship with Joseph Nutras. During this time, her 3.5-year-old daughter, the second Margaret Jane, died of typhus fever, leaving her with 1 child of up to 9 she had borne. She returned to Sunderland and took up employment at the Sunderland Infirmary, House of Recovery for the Cure of Contagious Fever, Dispensary and Humane Society. She sent her surviving child, Isabella, to live with her mother. One of her parents at the infirmary was engineer George Ward. They married at St Peter's Church, Monkwearworth, on the 28th of August 1865. Ward continued to suffer ill health and died on the 20th of October 1866 after a long illness characterised by paralysis and intestinal problems. The cause of death was recorded on his death certificate that of English cholera and typhoid. The attending doctor later gave evidence that Ward had been very ill, yet he had been surprised that his death was so sudden. Once again, Mary Ann collected the insurance money in respect of her husband's death. James Robinson was a shipwright at Peylon in Sunderland whose wife Hannah had recently died. He hired Mary Ann as a housekeeper in November 1866. A month later, when James's baby, John, died of gastric fever, he turned to his housekeeper for comfort and she became pregnant. Then Mary Ann's mother, living in Seaham Harbour, County Durham, became ill with hepatitis, so Mary Ann immediately went to her. Although the mother began to recover, she also began to complain of stomach pains. She died at age 54 in the spring of 1867, 9 days after Mary's arrival. In 1867, Mary Ann's stepfather, George Stott, married his widowed neighbour, Hannah Paley. Mary Ann's daughter, Isabella Mowbray, was brought back to the Robinson household and soon developed severe stomach pains and died, as did two of Robinson's children, Elizabeth and James. All three were buried in the last week of April and the first week of May 1867. Mary Ann received a life insurance payment of £5, 10 shillings and 6p for Isabella. Robinson married Mary Ann at St Michael's, Bishopworth, on the 11th of August 1867. Their first child, Margaret Isabella, Mary Isabella on her baptismal record, was born that November, but she became ill and died in February 1868. The second child, George, was born on the 18th of June 1869. Robinson, meanwhile, had become suspicious of his wife's insistence that he insure his life. He discovered that she'd run up debts of £60 behind his back and had stolen more than £50 that she had been expected to bank. Then he found out that Mary Ann had been forcing his older children to pawn household valuables. He threw her out, retaining custody of their son George. Mary Ann was desperate and living on the streets until a friend, Margaret Cotton, introduced her to her brother Frederick, a pitman and recent widower living in Bottle, Northumberland, who had lost 2 of his 4 children. Margaret had acted as a substitute mother for the remaining children, Frederick Jr. and Charles, but in late March 1870 she died from an undetermined stomach ailment, leaving Mary Ann to console the grieving Frederick Sr. Soon a 12th pregnancy was underway. Cotton and Mary Ann were married on the 17th of September 1870 at St Andrews, Newcastle upon Tyne, and their son Robert was born early in 1871. Soon after, Mary Ann learned that her former lover, Joseph Nattrass, was living 30 miles away in the County Durham village of West Auckland and was no longer married. She rekindled the romance and persuaded her new family to move near him. Cotton died in December that year from gastric fever. Insurance had been effected on his life and those of his sons. After Frederick's death, Nattrass soon became Mary Ann's lodger. She gained employment as a nurse to an excise officer recovering from smallpox. Popular cultural sources have called him John Quick Manning, though there appears to be no trace of a John Quick Manning in the records of the West Auckland Brewery or the National Archives. The census records, birth, death and marriages records also show no trace of him. However, Richard Quickman, a custom and excise man specialising in breweries, has been found in the records. His may be the real name of Mary Ann Cotton's lover. Soon, Mary became pregnant by him with her 13th child. Frederick Jr. died in March 1872, and their infant son, Robert, soon after. Then Nattrass became ill with gastric fever and died just after revising his will in Mary Ann's favour. The insurance policy Mary Ann had taken out on the still living Charles's life awaited collection. Mary Ann's downfall came when a parish official, Thomas Riley, asked her to help nurse a woman who was ill with smallpox. She complained that the last surviving Cotton boy, Charles Edward, was in the way and asked Riley if he could be committed to the workhouse. Riley, who served as a West Auckland's assistant coroner, said that she needed to accompany him. She told Riley that the boy was sickly and added, "I won't be troubled long, he'll go like all the rest of the Cottons." 5 days later, Mary Ann told Riley that the boy had died. Riley went to the village police and persuaded the doctor to delay writing a death certificate until the circumstances could be investigated. Mary Ann's first visit after Charles's death was not to the doctor but to the insurance office. There she discovered that no money would be paid out until the death certificate was issued. An inquest was held and the jury returned a verdict of natural causes. Mary Ann claimed to have used a row foot to relieve his illness and said that Riley had made accusations against her because she had rejected his advances. Then the local newspapers latched onto the story and discovered Mary Ann had moved around northern England and lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and 11 children, all of whom had died of stomach fevers. Rumour gave rise to suspicion and scientific investigation. Dr. William Byers Kilburn, who had attended Charles and kept samples and tests, showed that they contained arsenic. He told the police, who arrested Mary Ann and procured the exhumation of Charles's body. She was charged with his murder, although the trial was delayed until after the delivery in Durham Gaol on the 7th of January 1873, on her 13th and final child, whom she had named Margaret Edith Quick Manning Cotton. Cotton's trial began at Durham Assizes on the 5th of March 1873. The delay was caused by a problem in the selection of the prosecution counsel. Mr. Pinswell was first considered, but the Attorney General, Sir John Duke Coleridge, whose decision it was, chose his friend and protégé, Charles Russell. Russell's appointment over Aspinwall led to question in the House of Commons. However, it was accepted, and Russell conducted the prosecution. The Cotton case was the first of several famous poisoning cases he would be involved in during his career, including those of Adeline Bartlett and Florence Maybrick. The defence in the case was handled by Thomas Campbell Foster, who argued during the trial that Charles had died from inhaling arsenic used as a dye in the green wallpaper of the Cotton home. The doctor testified that there was no other powder on the same shelf in the chemist's shop as arsenic, only liquid. The chemist himself claimed that there were other powders. Campbell Foster argued that it was possible that the chemist had mistakenly used arsenic powder instead of bismuth powder, used to treat diarrhea, when preparing a bottle for Cotton, because he had been distracted by talking to other people. The jury retired for 90 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. The Times correspondent reported on the 20th of March, after conviction, the wretched woman exhibited strong emotion, but this gave place in a few hours to her habitual cold, reserved demeanour, while she harbours a strong conviction that the royal clemency will be extended towards her. She staunchly asserts her innocence of the crime she has been convicted of. Several petitions were presented to the Home Secretary, but to no avail. Mary Ann Cotton was hanged at Durham County Gaol on the 24th of March 1873 by William Calcraft. She died, but not from neck breaking, but by strangulation caused by the rope being rigged too short, possibly deliberately. Of Mary Ann's 13 children, only 2 survived her. Margaret Edith, 1873 until 1954, and her son George from her marriage to James Robinson. In 2015, ITV filmed a 2-part television drama, Dark Angel, starring Joanne Froggatt as Cotton. The series also featured Alan Armstrong, Jonas Armstrong, and Emma Fielding. The first part of the dramatisation was broadcast on the 31st of October 2016. The second part was broadcast on the 7th of November. The drama was inspired by the book Mary Ann Cotton, Britain's First Female, by David Wilson, a criminologist. The Mary Ann Cotton case was partly dramatised on an episode of the 2022 BBC radio podcast series Lucy Wolseley's Lady. A nursery rhyme concerning Cotton was composed after her hanging on the 24th of March 1873.